civil servant in the Belgian National Administration, and in the aftermath he was appointed as a professor in the veterinary faculty in Pretoria University in South Africa. He was appointed full professor at the University of Tromsø in the Arctic. So he's been working with infectious disease related to a number of Atlantic. So he's among the key specialists in tuberculosis in cattle, and he has been holding thousands of speeches across different continents. So this is deemed to be one of the world's experts. I give you the floor, Jacques.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. You have to speak loud.
Yeah, I will, and I'm putting my presentation in presentation mode, so I hope this will work now. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, but then we will get started and we will see how far this will bring us. Okay, but thank you for the introduction, Nicolas. Thank you to all of you to be there for this busy and interesting symposium. And as the first slide of my presentation indicates, we will speak about emerging infectious diseases and deforestation. But as you can see on the right-hand side, we will speak about zoonotic diseases. And zoonotic diseases are defined by these are diseases affecting humans, but finding their origin in the animal reservoir. And so now we understand also that these infection diseases affecting humans have something to do with reservoir in animals. And as you can see, there is livestock when we speak about animals, but there is also wildlife. And so you can immediately also understand that what is important in this problem is a third actor, which is the environment, and in our case, forests. Hence, also the link between deforestation and the emergence of these infectious diseases finding their origin in the animal reservoir. And because these things are connected, can I ask you if you can see that there is the next slide appearing on the screen? Is it okay? Okay, I assume it's okay. So this is why
you can put bigger the screen on your side. You can amplify the slide.
No.
Can you listen to me? Hello?
So that's, oui, yeah.
Tu peux m'entendre? Il y a moyen d'accroître la taille de la diapositive?
Non, elle est maximum.
Ok, un maximum.
So, hence the concept that I would like to introduce to you, but some of you may be familiar with the concept, it's One Health. And the One Health concept recognizes the interrelationship between animal, human, and the environment. And this is really, really important and in the core of how we can really address these issues of diseases emerging in the animal reservoir being transmitted to humans in the context of different ecosystems. And what I would like to mention to you is that this is now not a new concept, but there is a gentleman whose name is Rudolf Virchow. It's a German physician, but more than a century ago, that has coined the word zoonosis. So he was the one that recognized that some diseases found their origin in the animal reservoir and were transmitted to humans. This person has really made tremendous contribution and was actually the founding father of public health. And this, thanks to the work that is done with a bacterial disease affecting people. And the important thing that he discovered is that he was immediately understanding that social conditions fostered the spread of disease. In other words, the disease that he could see was affecting poor people living in very bad sanitary conditions. So already at that point in time, he was mentioning and identifying that we are not all equal towards diseases. And so if we now go 100 years further down the line, there has been this publication from 2008 about the global trends in emerging infectious diseases. One of the things that I would like to mention to you is in this presentation there is often links to the internet, and if you click the link you can go back to the information, in this case this scientific publication, and find more details about it. But what is really interesting in this publication is that it's mentioned that for the last 50 years or so, the emerging infectious diseases were dominated by zoonosis. More than 60% of infectious diseases were related to the transmission of the infection from animals to people. And of these diseases, 70% originated in wildlife. So wildlife is really extremely important. The other thing that you can see on this map is actually that the vast majority of the events that are reported in the northern hemisphere. So for example, in Africa, there is not so many of these reported events, which indicates that the knowledge about this thing is very, very partial and very much driven by the north. And if we put here the other interesting maps, and I want you to concentrate on the panel A, so the one on the top left part, because this is the zoonotic pathogens that are originating from wildlife. And so as you can see in Africa, this is really, really important. Another very important thing is panel D, which is related to zoonotic diseases transmitted by vectors, so vector-borne diseases. And so this brings me to the next slide. When we speak about animal reservoir being at the origin of infections, you can have what is called the primary reservoir, here exemplified on the left part of this figure by bats, rodents, or waterfowl. And then from these reservoir, infection can be transmitted directly to humans, or can be transmitted to what is called intermediate or amplifier species. And these species can be also wildlife species or livestock. And then through this amplification, these pathogens are multiplying in these intermediate hosts, and from there they can jump to the human reservoir and infect and cause diseases in humans. So you see, it can be a direct cycle or indirect cycle via intermediate amplifier host or through vectors. And here is something that is really, really important. And it's very important to understand that not all zoonotic diseases are important. Well, they are all important to a certain degree, but there is a worldwide concern for zoonotic diseases with a pandemic potential. A pandemic potential means that these infections are spread all over the globe. So they may originate wherever, for example, like COVID in China, but this became a worldwide problem. Nowadays, there is this mpox, formerly called the monkeypox, for which there is a reservoir in Central Africa, and the world is panicking because they are fearing that this may become a pandemic. rightly, wrongly, we will discuss it later. But what is really important is to understand that those diseases that are really important, those zoonotic diseases that are really important, are those with pandemic potential. And how do these diseases acquire this pandemic potential? Well, you can see on this figure, for example, on the bottom left, rabies. It's a virus. It's caused mainly by bites of stray dogs. Yearly, there are 50,000 people dying from this infection, but there is hardly ever a human being that is infecting another human being with this virus. So the reservoir is exclusively in the animal, not in people. And then you have another type of zoonotic disease, that is Ebola. Perhaps, I'm sure you know Ebola too. In this case, the reservoir is also mainly in this time bats, but from time to time, people can get infected via contact with other infected people. But the most important reservoir is bats. So this is the main source of infection for humans. If we take the example of the dengue virus, then in this case, yes, there is an origin in the animal reservoir, in this case some primates, but there is a lot of transmission from human to human. And then you have the last case that is really the most worrisome, exemplified by HIV, exemplified by COVID, by which, yes, there is an origin in the animal reservoir, in primates for HIV, in likely bats for the COVID. But what is important is that through a series of mutations, the virus gets adapted to human being, and then the transmission occurs in human. Very few. And this is the condition by which infection can become pandemics. It's because there is a cycle of infection in humans. And so this is really where the risk of a pandemic exists. But as I try to mention to you, this doesn't arrive in one day. So there are different phases. The first thing is, for example, from the wildlife reservoir, transmission to livestock, in this case, pigs. This is what is called a pre-emergence. So we see a couple of outbreaks, so incidents of diseases in pigs, but this is not noticed or not reported, and then nobody pays attention. But within this new host in pigs, the virus can develop and acquire new mutations so that at one point in time, it can become pathogen for humans too. And so this is then an outbreak of disease in a local community. So it's a local emergence. But then the virus continuing mutation can acquire properties so that it can be transmitted from human to human. And then this is really a cause of concern and may be at the origin of a pandemic. So as you can see, you really have, these three different steps that can be followed in order to arrive to these pandemics. So from here, it's also very important to understand that if one is doing nothing before stage 3, we are always too late, always too late. And this is a little bit what has happened with HIV, which has happened also with COVID-19. Millions of people will die because we are not prepared. And we have to be prepared. In other words, we have to be able to recognize the potential risk of a pandemic at its pre-emergence stage. So we have to scrutinize and to test the animal reservoir. And this is actually the base of this One Health concept. It has been revived. The new concept is only 15 years of age and has been founded by this gentleman, Calvin Schwab, who is a veterinary epidemiologist. And through this work, nowadays, things like influenza, influenza is also a viral disease that originates in animals and that may have a pandemic potential. And it has been recognized that we have to be able to survey the emergence of this virus in the animal population, and then also be able to implement mitigation measures in the animal reservoir, in the environment, and also in the human population. And I will not go into detail, but you can see exemplifying how we can collaborate between different sectors of health, animal health, people, and human health. And it is so important that the WHO, the World Health Organization, has also provide us with pandemic influenza risk management and tools for influenza pandemic risk assessment. So it's so important. Pandemics are so detrimental for human beings that a lot of effort has been put by UN organizations like the WHO and the FAO, as well as the animal organization, the World Organization for Animal Health, in order to work together and making sure that we are prepared to address these potential risks. And there is this endorsement by these three organizations for guiding us in addressing zoonotic diseases in the different countries. And again, you can follow it, and I will not go into detail because this presentation is not aiming at providing us with technical details, but just with ideas. But what is important is that everything is in place so that we can detect and so that we can act before the pandemic is taking momentum and infecting millions of people, among which a large proportion may die. And as the world is battling the coronavirus pandemic, it's worth remembering the pivotal role played by human-driven deforestation in emerging diseases such as SARS and HIV. So the point here is that because we understand now that these zoonotic diseases with pandemic potential are originating in animal reservoir and mainly in wildlife, it's very, very important that we recognize this and understand how this is transmitted. So that the virus cannot be transmitted haphazard. There are routes of transmission, and there are factors, there are actions, human-driven actions that favor this possible transmission and the risk of zoonotic diseases with pandemic potential. And deforestation is one of the drivers of such enhancement of the risk. So we have a responsibility towards these things. We have a responsibility towards forest for the reasons that you are discussing with Nicolas and the host in your country. But we have also a responsibility to fight deforestation, because deforestation is also one of the human-driven actions that enhance the risk for zoonotic diseases with pandemic potential to occur. And again, here I would like to point to a publication that Nicolas de Sardelais and I have written a couple of years ago, and it's a little bit what we are trying to do today. It's to bring the biological part of the problem in relation with the legal aspects and the environmental aspects that we have to consider if we want to have, mitigation actions that mean something. So it's really a pledge, a call for transdisciplinary action. And so we have to be able to understand each other. And again, I really strongly encourage you to read this publication because it provides you with some background information that is really interesting and that you can put in perspective in the context of deforestation in your country. And so when we speak about deforestation and generally speaking, the factors that increase the zoonotic risks, they are here summarized on this slide in the case of COVID-19, but they are really there for any type of emerging disease with zoonotic potential. It's deforestation, illegal trade, intensified agriculture, antibiotic resistance, and climate change. And although they're different titles, they are really extremely linked together. Deforestation has to do with intensification of agriculture. Deforestation has to do also with wildlife trade. And this is a little bit what we will try to discuss now and to see how this is actually working. And again, the idea is, if we recognize that there is a risk, what can we do to mitigate this risk? And the key point here, without going in too many details, we detail certain aspects, but the very, very, very important point here is that although we are dealing with biological hazards, with risk, the answer cannot be biological. For example, COVID-19 is a problem. The biological answer was development of vaccine. This was fantastic, a great achievement. But once the vaccine is there, everything is about people. Who will have access to the vaccine? And if you have access to the vaccine, will you take the vaccine? Or will you question mark the fact that you should be vaccinated? In other words, the social dimension there is extremely important. And we will come back to this also when we are dealing with these emerging infectious diseases events. And the problem is that we recognize that basically all these problems linked to the emergence of these zoonotic disease with pandemic potential, these are wicked problems, meaning extremely complex and extremely intricate. And we know, if we go back to the history of HIV, AIDS, and COVID-19, yes, that there is a problem in the reservoir, and that there has been an excessive and increased rate of deforestation for agriculture, food production, and wild meat hunting and trade that has really favored the emergence of these diseases. This on top of the problem to come, but to a certain extent already present, global warming and mass species extinction. So nowadays you can really see and hear in the news the discourse is about climate change and global warming and biodiversity and mass species extinction. And this is really important. But the point is that emerging infectious diseases, they are already there. They've been there, they are here today, and they will be there tomorrow too. So we better be prepared to this and also see these problems of deforestation as a potential problem related to the emergence of emerging diseases. And as I said to you, it's a very complex problem. It's very, very intricate because this is the challenge that we are facing: population growth, health, consumption and production. We have to feed the population, and in order to feed the population, we have to produce food. And traditionally, or the traditional way to produce food is really meat. And there is a direct correlation between the more you, I would say, well, roughly said, the more money you have, the more meat you will be eating. So it's also a sign of development. And so this is why even today we are already eating, billions of livestock. I would like to draw your attention to beef meat, because there, if we don't change our habits, the increase of production of meat by beef will be more than 80% by the year 2050. And so we know also that ruminants like cattle, like sheep, goats, they produce also methane. Methane, that is also a gas that is implicated in greenhouse gas. So it's extremely intricate. So If we want to feed the people, we have to produce more beef. If we produce more beef, we enhance, the greenhouse emission of greenhouse effect gases. And at the same time, because we have to feed these animals that we will be eating, we encourage deforestation. And this is really an immense problem already today in South America, where the Amazon forest is daily deforested, because point directly that if our concern is deforestation, and if we want to make sure that our actions are important and sustainable, we cannot ignore the fact that people want to eat meat. And if we don't change our habits or tradition or culture related to meat, we may face lots of problems, because if we want to feed people with livestock products, then it means that deforestation will go on. So that's a little bit to set the scene. But besides deforestation, in the deforestation problem, there are two main actors, wildlife or game needs, and also the problem of livestock production. If we first consider game hunting, yes, we have to recognize that for the last 30 years, these expanding. Not at all, that's not the reason. The reason is that, as you know, already 70% of the world population is living in cities, and this is going to be even more in the years to come. And this urban and peri-urban population needs to be fed. And so there is a demand for meat products. And so this is the reason why trade of wild meat is encouraged, and this is also one of the reasons why trade with wildlife meat may also enhance the risk of transmission of infection that are present in wildlife. But the point here is that we should not put the blame on this type of trade per se, because the infection risks are actually poorly understood. Yes, there is a risk. Yes, we cannot ignore the risk. But importantly, it's very important to understand that the risk linked to this type of activity, so game hunting, is by far less important than the problem linked to intensive livestock production system. And why is it so? Because livestock production is the largest driver of natural habitat loss. So this is perhaps what you are facing in your country too. If people do deforestation, it's not for the pleasure to do this, it's because room should be made for some type of activities. And the main activities are the production of cereals and cropland for. And what is really incredible is that 40% of the ice-free terrestrial surface is dedicated to agricultural food production. And 75 to 80% is used for grazing land or cropland. In other words, cropland meaning land dedicated to production of cereals and soy for the consumption of humans, but also of animals. And 1/3 of the cereals that are being produced are directly used to feed animals instead of feeding us. And so you can see that, this is a vicious circle, because we need on one hand, if nothing is changing, to enhance the production and of these livestock products. This enhances greenhouse gases. This is also a factor that presides to the extinction of different species. So there is a biodiversity concern there. But on top of this, there is also this possibility of transmission of diseases from the wildlife to livestock, because there is a tremendous encroachment in wildlife habitat. So this is how it is working. So then the question is, we need to do something, but what can we do? But the first thing is limiting human encroachment. And limiting human encroachment, because I mentioned to you that deforestation is mainly there because we want to have land for production of agriculture product and mainly livestock product. So we need to limit the production of meat. But we have to feed the people at the same time. And so we have to be able to change the diets of people, and there must be a global transition to diets which are low in livestock sources. So we have to go towards vegetarian food. We may like it or dislike it, but this is really just mathematics. We are so many people on planet Earth, and if we want there to be still hospitable to us, we need as one people, one human population, to transit from the type of food that we have today to other type of foods that are mainly based on vegetables. We have also to contain tropical wild meat hunting and trade. But very important here, at the same time as we say this, we have to make sure that we are securing access to this wild meat to indigenous people and local communities. So, and this is extremely important because in the north we are often putting the blame on what is happening. You know, it's deforestation, it's this hunting, people are hunting too much, there is encroachment for the habitat, as if this was, you know, the responsibility of the local people. Local people, they are only concerned about their survival. It's globalization that is the problem, not the livelihood of local people. And we have to make sure that this is also taken on board, and we never have to put the blame on local communities. And the last thing that we have also to make sure is that we improve the biosecurity of the food that we harvest. For example, you know, 40 to 60% of what is harvested is destroyed, is wasted, because there is not good practice. Well, if we have better practice to preserve food, possibly also we will reduce the risk of transmission of infection through these foods. So limiting the encroachment is really something that is important. But nowadays there are people, you know, we living in a techno world in which robots, informatic, artificial intelligence will sort everything, we're told. So it's a technology-driven society. I want really to make it very clear, although technology will help us, it will not sort out the problems. So thinking that technological development will sort out the problem of deforestation, it will not happen. We have to do something. We, people of planet Earth, have to be something. And as I mentioned to you, and I want to reiterate this one more time, nowadays there is a growing consensus that if we want to feed the population, we will not make it, regardless of the advancement of technology, if we do not change our diets. And so this is what is called flexitarian diets, in other words, diets that are originating from vegetables. And here is a nice picture that really summarizes what it is all about. If we do favor these flexitarian diets, then we will reduce greenhouse gas emission from ruminants. We will reduce the biodiversity loss, meaning that the ecosystem will provide us with services and the earth will still be hospitable. We will improve our health too. It's really nicely well documented. Eating too much meat is really detrimental for your health. And then last but not least, we will also reduce the risk of transmission of infection at the wildlife, livestock, human interface. So that's something that we need to do. But it will not happen, tomorrow. So it's a process, and so there are different steps. And what is very, very, very important is to recognize, and it's recognized also in the Sustainable Development Goal, that game meat, is really central in the economy and the cultural and the culture of what is called indigenous people and local communities, IPLCs. So that has to be recognized. Likewise, it has to be recognized by international organizations like the CITES, the Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species, that instead of opposing local people practicing game hunting and bioconservation, we should more consider this, as actor. And if it's well done, the building of livelihood from sustainable wildlife use is actually something that can contribute to conservation species and ecosystem. So local people, through the transmission of their traditional knowledge, are not a threat for biodiversity. On the contrary, they are showing practices that actually favor biodiversity and conservation of species and ecosystem. Extremely, extremely important. But nevertheless, there is a public health threat. So there is these diseases that can be transmitted from the wildlife reservoir to people via intermediate host, mainly livestock. And so we have to find the balance between these different policies. And this is really something that is extremely difficult to attend. And one of the things that people are debating is perhaps to put a blanket ban on wild meat. This is one of the worst possible solutions because it doesn't take into consideration the needs of local people. So this is something that should not be a priority, and for the reason that are highlighted in this text. But what is the problem is really that from harvesting for local community, with the development of cities, there is a market for wild meat. And because of this, there will be enhancements of the game hunting. And because there is more game hunting, the risk of transmitting these diseases are also enhanced. So the first step would always be to maintain wild hunting in local communities and see to which extent hunting can be enhanced. But this is conditional to not destroying forests, natural habitats, and also making sure that the risk for transmission of infectious disease is controlled. But it starts with reserving exclusive access rights to game and the game on the customary lands to people that are in local communities. The other thing that is also important is that when we discuss with people problems of biosecurity, this is really not priority. The priority is we have to eat, we have to feed the people, we have to trade for a livelihood. And so we need also to change this perception, and we need to do something in order to enhance biosecurity. But the thing is that if we come with biosecurity that have been implemented in the north and trying to apply them in the south, that will never work because conditions are completely different. So the only approach that makes sense is to discuss this with local community, and that these biosecurity measures come from the community itself. Once the people understand what their benefit is, they will provide the changes. The problem is that these changes, their effects can only be seen from time to time after years or decades. but nevertheless you can measure if your action is okay by appreciating the change in the habits of the people. One of the things that is also extremely important in the transmission of these infectious diseases is what is called these wet markets. We all see these images of Wuhan in China, where the virus has likely originated in China. So we have to do something there too. So this means that different type of actions have to be taken either at the production site, either at the sites where these products are traded. And then we can also try to improve the situation by doing what you are doing, restoring and reforestation programs that are really important in reducing the risk of wildlife origin disease transmission. We can ask also logging company, mining company, to be legally required to include zoonotic spillover risk reduction measures in the management. It's something that is feasible. We can also foresee intervention that can be implemented in trying to breaking the chain of transmission. For example, vaccination of wildlife is very difficult, but vaccinating intermediate hosts so that the virus has less chance to multiply in these intermediate hosts and then pass to people. So these intermediate hosts are often livestock. Livestock you can vaccinate. You can have also integrated vector management. I did not discuss this too much, but vector-borne disease, you can do something. Nowadays, programs to reducing malaria by, in some area, like I know in South Africa, by releasing sterile male in the environment and so making sure that the population will be reduced. Measures like implementing nets with repellent. These are things that we can do together in order to reduce the burden and the risk of transmission of this disease. And as you can see, I even list, this is something that is practiced also in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the introduction of predator and scavenger that do a fantastic job in reducing the occurrence of some diseases in wildlife reservoir, and hence making also a reduction of the risk of transmission. And finally, One Health is also something that is endorsed by these international organizations and that has to be implemented. And there are some risks in this One Health that I would like to discuss with you. But just this figure to tell you that security measures can be applied as well in rural environments as well as in markets where there is risk of transmission. And as you can see, there are different types of action that one can implement there. Some are realistic, some are absolutely not realistic. And as you can see, this is something that has been designed by people from the north, and it's not right. So this is just an idea, but it's people in the south, local communities, traditional leaders, local authorities that have to implement things that are efficient but also doable in the context of their communities. So One Health, as I mentioned to you, it's really a concept that is really important, and it has really opened the eye of a lot of professionals, but also the eye of us, the people, that everything is linked. So healthy ecosystem, healthy animals and healthy people, this is what we want, and they are linked. And so it makes a lot of sense to really discuss this in one context, which is called this One Health context. And there are different types of approaches that we can try to implement. But what is very important to understand is that when we say One Health, there are different understandings. And I would like to exemplify this by speaking about the narratives that are important for One Health and the discourses that are important for One Health. And I define narrative like stories that are shared among small communities based on the experience and tradition in these communities, whereas discourses are the big stories. It's, you know, the guidelines from international organizations like WHO and the FAO, for example. And so the problem is that discourse, they are talking about ecology, about animals, about people and disease. They are speaking about the risk of emergence of disease, and this risk is important not for local people, but it's important for people in the north. We don't want diseases that are emerging in the south to be transmitted to us in no time because of globalization and because of aviation. Things that have emerged on day 1 in the south can be transmitted on day 2 in the north. So we want to preserve this. This is a very a discourse that is originating from the dominant north. And this means also that, you know, the narratives that are important for the people in the south are marginalized. And so there is no big room to problems that are voiced by people living with and responding to the disease locally. And so that's something that I think that you have already discussed a little bit. And so this means that we have to make sure that we understand each other. It's very important that we understand that there are different views, there are different worldviews. What we think about categorization in humans and animals and the different rights and how we live together is very much different in different parts of the world. And this has to be taken on board if we want to make progress in the implementation of One Health. And again, here are some publications for your interest. You can really read it and understand that it's really, really extremely complex, but it starts by understanding you know, the other people's view. Because if we don't do that, and I took the example of the deforestation in South America, and we are speaking about deforestation there, and why is deforestation taking place there? Because they want to produce meat, beef meat, not for local consumption, but for consumption in the north. And so if we don't pay attention, One Health approaches could merely be greenwashing exercises, not taking into account the reality on the ground in the southern hemisphere. So, Nicolas, what I think I will do now, because I've already spoken for some time, I prepared another part of this presentation related to the Mpox issue to which you confronted in Rwanda nowadays. And so I was thinking that perhaps this is something that could be discussed among you, and that you can find all the information that is available nowadays, and then try to make sense out of this information and really see how it applies to your understanding of the problem and which type of action can be taken. And I acknowledge that this goes a little bit beyond deforestation, but the fact is that the Mpox is originating also in the wildlife reservoir, although the wildlife reservoir is not identified properly yet. But regardless of the wildlife reservoir, what is really important is, you know, all the steps that have occurred or not occurred in this particular case to prepare the world for a next possible pandemic. Is it okay? So I will stop here and listen to you.
Jacques, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We
Yes.
still, I think the majority of the participants would like that you skim over the slides on One Health. Can you, in short, explain what you have been laying down, please?
So your question is One Health explaining a little bit more what it is?
No, could you go through your slides regarding MPOX?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you very much indeed.
So that will take a couple of minutes, but let's try to do that. Okay. So Mpox, we know it's a virus. We know that Mpox is nowadays present in DRC, but also in Rwanda and Uganda. I mean, these are the countries that are the most affected by this problem. The other thing that is really important is Mpox is not a new COVID. And why is it so? It's very important to understand that COVID was a pandemic because transmission was so easy. It did not require close contact. You know, if you were in the view of somebody that was excreting the virus by coughing, you would be infected. And people were excreting the virus before they were even sick. So that the conditions by which COVID spread very, very, very rapidly in the population. For Mpox, it's not the case. Mpox is something that is transmitted by close contact. And because of this, it's very unlikely, if the virus does not acquire different type of mutations, but nowadays with the virus that are circulating, it's very unlikely that it will become a pandemic. What is very likely is that it will infect local people and it will be a national problem. But for it to become a pandemic, there are other things that are required. So, and in order to understand a little bit what has happened, I would like to go back to what has happened in Nigeria. So we see here on the top right a picture of a gentleman that is infected by Mpox. This is a citizen from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he had accepted that this picture would be shown worldwide, and so we thank this gentleman that is willing to share, you know, his condition to raise awareness worldwide. But so the problem is that in Nigeria, the virus has likely circulated 8 years in the human population before it sparked a global outbreak. So what happened? How could it have been stopped? And so this is a map of Nigeria, and you see a series of events that have happened there. And so it started from there it jumped to Lagos, which is a big city, and this is what is really important, is that nowadays it is with 10, 15 million people, dense community, with close contact. This is where things will happen. And number 4 is important because this is the first case that has been reported. So it took 3 years to be reported, and then the infection spread to Abuja, the capital, number 5, and then to Northern Province, number 6, and then also at the same time there were outbreaks in Cameroon. So this is what retrospectively one could see. So the question is, we discovered it and it became a problem in 2022, but the virus was in the population for 7-8 years before. Why was it not detected? And then here is the story, is that there was a medical doctor that saw this case, wanted to report it, and the way to report it is to report it via scientific publication. And people that read this scientific publication of the manuscript before they should be published found that the findings were not strong enough to be published. And so these findings could not be communicated to the scientific community, and hence no action could be seen. And then there was also the COVID problems, by which this became the main problem, and so other problems were not considered as important. And by the way, the fact that COVID also induced distanciation between people, this may also have reduced the problem of mpox as a side effect. But people got interested in mpox. Why? Because some people in the north were infected, in the UK, in the US, in Israel, and Singapore. And all of a sudden that came important, and the primary indication were such that people understood that people that were infected all traveled to Nigeria. Nevertheless, nobody connected the dots. So you see, information is so important. And then, you know, it followed in 22, some more cases appeared, and then these cases appeared in what is called MSM, meaning men having sex with men. So in the homosexual community. And so once it's there in the homosexual community, there is always a stigmatization problem. And at the time, it was not proven that there was a sustainable human-to-human transmission. So it was not recognized. But there were contacts, there were very close contacts, particularly in the homosexual community, and this sort of paved the way for the spread of the infection. And as I mentioned to you, the is not identified yet. And regardless of what the reservoir is, the problem now is that the infection has jumped in the human population, and that there is a cycle of infection in the human population. And so because of this, there is a risk of pandemic, with the reserve that the virus should acquire more mutations so that it can spread more easily between people. For the time being, it's really close contact, and obviously sexual contact is very important. There's a stigmatization of the homosexual community, but there is also cases among the heterosexual population, and so this is the case nowadays. And so the important is that it took so much time to find it out, and there are again a couple of reasons that are listed here, and will not go into much detail, but there is one thing that is important in this context, is that this mpox is a pox virus, and the most famous pox virus is the smallpox virus. That is a human pathogen, and smallpox is the only disease that has been eradicated from planet Earth. So there is no human that is infected by the smallpox virus nowadays on the planet. But the problem is that smallpox was such a problem, was such a deadly disease, that all the human population has been vaccinated until the smallpox virus was eradicated in 1977 and officially in 1980. And so if the virus is no more there, we should not vaccinate anymore the people. And so people are no more vaccinated against smallpox. And the important thing here to understand is the following, is that if you vaccinate somebody against smallpox, you protect that person against smallpox, but there is also a protection towards other pox viruses that are very similar to the smallpox, but that are not smallpox. For example, mpox. So meaning that when we were vaccinated against smallpox, we were protected against mpox. Now that we are no more vaccinated against smallpox, this protection is no more there. And so the population is naive, as it said, towards this new virus. So by 2016 in Nigeria, only 2% of the 200 million Nigerians had been vaccinated against smallpox. And so you see, 10%, but 2.6% at protective levels of immunity. So they were not protected anymore. And this has also paved the way for mpox to install itself in the human population. And I'm mentioning this to you, although it happened in Nigeria. And what is important to know nowadays is that the virus that is circulating in West Africa and the virus that is circulating in Central Africa are two different types of viruses. So meaning that outbreaks of mpox are happening here and there, and from often they are not detected. Very often they remain local, but given the transformation of society, given the problems in Central Africa, in the DRC with war and all these things, the raising the awareness related to these new infection isn't there, and hence it may be possible that this infection becomes something that is really important. And it becomes really important because it's now in cities. In cities, you have millions of people. Contacts are very, very, very important. And this is, I would say, the melting pot in which things can happen. And as I mentioned here also, there is no evidence that the virus has acquired mutation that makes him more transmissible via sex as HIV/AIDS. Not at all. So the virus is just transmitted by contact. Is it skin to skin, from a blister to the skin of somebody else, or via sexual contact, just because there is also very, very tight contact between people. And so one of the problems that is linked also in the detection of this virus, and this is exemplified by the episode that is reported here in Nigeria, there was a patient that was infected with the virus, and this person committed suicide. Why did this person commit suicide? We don't know. But what is very likely is that although it was a person that has married, he also said that he was homosexual. And of course, being an homosexual is really problematic in Nigeria. It's a criminal offense that is punishable by up to 16 years of prison. In addition, cultural beliefs, religion attachment make that these things are considered to be sin. So if you are infected with this virus, it may mean in the eye of your neighbor, your community, that you have done sins. And this is not acceptable because you will be rejected by the community. And so this is why the infection is or has remained hidden somehow. And so because it has been hidden, no identification of the problem could be done in due time, and hence we are too late. And now the infection has spread within communities and within cities. And so the problem is that the reason why I'm mentioning this to you in Nigeria, because it's very likely that it's the same type of phenomenon that is happening in Central Africa. So the virus is in the human population, but it's not identified because it's somehow new, because there is a sort of stigmatization of what is happening there, and so it's hidden, and hence measures cannot be taken. Here, in coming back to Nigeria, things have happened, but for example, nowadays there are more than 4,000 suspected cases in Nigeria. The US has already provided 10,000 doses of an mpox vaccine, but that's nothing compared to the piling of virus that is already been done in the northern hemisphere, where hundreds of thousands of doses has been produced or are being produced for the protection of people in the northern hemisphere, not for the protection of people that require it the most, meaning people in the southern hemisphere. So it's really important also that we do things also targeting population that are the most in need of these vaccines. And just to mention, the European Union has already accepted or to donate 250,000 doses of mpox vaccine to the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So that's something that is okay. So this second part, I will not go into detail, but this explain why human mpox after 40 years is an unintended consequence of smallpox eradication. As I mentioned to you, smallpox eradication made it, the consequence of this is that people were no more vaccinated, and this vaccination that was partly protective against mpox is no more there. The population is naive, and hence if it's exposed to mpox, it is not protected anymore. And so this is what has happened this week or the week before, last week, sorry. It's that Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the director of the WHO, mentioned that mpox was a public health emergency for international concern. It's not yet a pandemic, but it's, a stage by which action can be taken. And so among these action that can be taken, the production of vaccine and the delivery of vaccine to the population that are the most in need is already started. And as you can see, there is a link by which you can find and follow what is written there. And my last slide is really to say that what is absolutely needed in Africa is that vaccines are produced locally. So the capability is there. It's just something that has to be put in place. And in order to do that thing, one needs the involvement of the world community to provide the financial needs to make it happen. Thank you for your attention. I will stop here.
Thank you, Jacques, for a good presentation. The audience would like to ask some questions about. Can you hear me, Jacques?
I can hear you, yes.
Thank you so much. The audience would like to ask some questions.
Please.
Thank you very much. We are talking about many in this symposium about the future of forests in our life with the slogan, our nature, our right. Yes, you come up about the One Health. According to the presentation, good presentation, we attended with both ears. I'm very happy to ask this question. Can you clear in these 3 lines at least the relationship and the relation between or the contribution of the forest to the zoonosis? Yes, many you present that the zoonotic disease come from the main vector are the animals. Yes, as we know actually. How the forest is coming in relation. Thank you.
Deforestation is problematic in many aspects. And you discussed this also into that forest rendered to is where you find us to be there in order to maintain the services that are important for our survival. The problem is that if we do exploitation of these forests because of the services that these ecosystems have to give us, there will be different consequences. And climate change and loss of biodiversity are the most important ones. To be very aware that this transmission of pathogens is an issue. And what I try to discuss with you is that it is an issue, but there are different gradations of risks. And through what we have seen with HIV/AIDS, with COVID, we can really see that the consequences are tremendous. And so we cannot afford to have different pandemic occurring. We have to put in place a system by which we can prevent these things to happen. And this is what I tried to present to you during this conversation, is how we can prevent. And the best way to prevent is to start to understand. And the understanding starts by there is deforestation because we need land to produce agricultural goods for livestock. And if we recognize this, then we have to put in place mitigation actions that will make that forest will still be able to provide us with their services. And if we don't pay attention, this environment will not provide us with services that we need, and the earth will be less hospitable. And so we have sort of to make sure that we understand the challenges, and that yes, we want to feed the population. Yes, there is a right for everybody to have access to food of high quality. Yes, it's right for people to have access to meat. But by doing so, there are consequences. And so one of the consequences that we have to be aware is that there will be zoonotic risks. So risk of transmission of agents that can be at the origin of pandemics. And so it's a reflection that we have to have. And again, we can draw big lines, but then all the challenge is now, how can we translate this mitigation action in something that is accepted by local communities? And this is really, really important. If deforestation is taking place because we want to produce beef, and the meat of this beef will be eaten by people in the northern hemisphere, that is not right. And this is the type of discussion that I would like to have with you.
Thank you, Jack. Allow me to accept only two questions. One question from Professor Nicholas and the one from the audience. If possible, I can allow them to ask all questions, then you answer all the questions at the same time. Let's start by Professor Nicholas.
Yes, about your comments regarding the exploitation by local communities of wildlife. I've been in a number of protected areas across Uganda lately and discussing with rangers the derogation schemes that apply regarding wood harvesting, bee, honey from the honey hives harvesting, but also the small game hunting. The majority of dangers highlight the difficulties to strike a balance between a sustainable use of the components of the biodiversity and the resilience of the ecosystems. In particular, that will be the case of honey hives, which are important regarding pollination of trees or of shrubs. If the use of honeyhive harvest is too high, it will impact upon the whole structure of the forest. So you mentioned that it requires a high level of monitoring to determine the exact level. And so everywhere national park or protected areas management authorities are either facing a low population pressure, so in that case the harvest does not entail huge consequence, but whenever the population pressure is too high, or the local population are interacting regarding trade with big cities, then the harvesting could increase the pressure. And rangers authorities, at least in Uganda, but I imagine the Rwandese authorities face the same difficulties, have difficulties to control the proper harvesting of trees. So I've been discussing that time and again. I think also we see across the continent the rise of megapolis, with Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt in Nigeria, Abidjan, Accra, Kampala is 6 million inhabitants. And so with the improvement of communication, roads, the remote areas are much more connected to a big city. And it's difficult for to avoid the what you mentioned and what you have been discarding. So could you comment upon this? Because you have the experience with respect to South Africa.
No, I think that if I want, I mean, this is exactly the problem. This is exactly the problem. But what I try to advocate is that the first consideration that one has to have is the need of local communities. So we have to take this in consideration, and local communities, through their tradition, their culture, since ages have managed the harvesting in a sustainable way. And I would like to refer to work that is being done by an economist that won the Nobel Prize, Orstom, and she was the one that explained or highlighted the problem related, as we know, to the tragedy of the commons. So they are common goods. The forest is a common good. Communities can harvest and do it in a sustainable way. But if there is too much pressure, because all of a sudden harvesting meat is no more just for the community, but is also to provide food to the big cities, then of course there is a risk that the harvesting will no more be sustainable. But what Orstom Eleanor Ostrom, it's a lady, by the way, really clearly demonstrate, and again, this study made that she won the Nobel Prize in economics, is that she did say that, you know, when there is a common good, it is not automatic that there will be a tragedy of the common. The tragedy of the common, what is it? There is a communal pasture, and, you know, local communities leave their animals grazing on this parcel, and to the benefit of everybody, and everybody is happy. But all of a sudden, because it's working quite well, the number of animals is increasing, and because of the increase of the number of animals, the grazing is really not sustainable anymore, and there is deterioration of the habitat. And so then the question is, everybody recognized that there is, and so Eleanor Ostrom said that, you know, the management of is important to go back to traditional knowledge and understanding how things were functioning. Because, for example, when it comes to disease, there is a system where there is disease control. I remember in Ethiopia, there is common pasture, but if you're originating from this tribe, your animal, although they are pasturing on the same pasture as, you know, animals originating from another tribe, although they are pasturing on the same parcel, they are pasturing different parts of the parcel. And because of this distanciation, there is no transmission of disease from one to the other herd. So what I'm trying to get at is to say that up to now there has been a sustainable harvesting, but nowadays things have changed. You mentioned different cities. There is projection that within 20 to 30 years, you know, between Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire and Lagos in Nigeria, it will just be one city with more than 150 million people. So these people need to be fed. And so if nothing is changing in the type of diet these people will receive and accept, there is no solution. We are going towards the tragedy of the commons. So this is why that we have really to consider these problems with this type of perspective. And we really should be working very hard in trying to make sure that we will be able to have diets that are not so damaging for the environment. But this needs to be convinced that mitigation action are possible, but they should not be just cosmetic, superficial, for the benefit of the rich or the people in the north, but they should be beneficial for local communities. And so if we want to have sustainable development, these things have to be taken on board, and government have to work hard with communities in trying to change the way we perceive a relationship to the environment and to the services ecosystems are providing us.
Thank you, Jacques, for a good presentation and answering the question. Let me ask the audience to appreciate you by clapping.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. To discuss all the presentation which take place, and we really need to understand your perspective and your comments about everything. So I would like to ask people who are in the round table to join join me here, then we discuss. Thank you. And the director of Rugezi Ornithology Center and the WCI, then we go to the end. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, the audience and the panel member on the roundtable. We thank you, everyone, to be on this symposium. As a participant, you have followed all the presentation from the state affair by Nicholas and the I would like to highlight your perspective on each one presentation you take you're interested in and you get some point. I would like to start by Pacific to highlight one of the interesting things you get from this symposium thing.
Hello everyone, I'm Wenda Pacific Shukur. I'm currently pursuing my bachelor degree in entrepreneurship at African Leadership University, but also international economics at the University of Rwanda. So far, I was enjoying the sessions whereby Professor Nicholas was talking about the EU environmental regulations. So one of the key points I found in the sessions is how EU is trying to manage those environmental impacts which may affect forests, of course, which is one of the key reservoir and sinks for our lives. Thank you so much. And also on the session of carbon market, as a young economist, I wish every young people in the house should think nature as a resource. Africa, we have so much resources, but many of our people think that our natural resource is all about natural minerals such as gold, coltan, and everything. But our first natural resources is wildlife, and it's become a resource when it's restored and when we have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I would like to go to Berenice.
Thank you. My name is Pilintier, the student of Nursery and Dairy. Are you talking about today or all the session from?
Mostly for the presentation of today.
Okay, thank you. The first thing that I found interesting in today's session is how the EU is taking the responsibility of like how they be the first ones, as the EU countries have got so many industries which can degrade the environment and the way they be the first one to to take those responsibilities. Like they know that they are somehow contributing to that because of so many large industries and so on, and once they are aware of that, they are able to take the responsibilities of controlling them so as not to harm others. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to jump to Jean-Claude. Tell us about the last presentation by Jacques Godefroy about the zoonotic diseases. It seems that this is a problematic issue on the global, and if we don't do anything to tackle this issue, might result on big issue for the global issue as a pandemic. What do you think, and what do you suggest?
So thank you. I'm here by the name of Jacques Mashime. I'm Avura as instructor in education. So let me start from what we have seen in the morning. So what I learned from today sessions, the strategies Europeans unions. So what I learned from yesterday, I mean today's session in the morning, is just the strategies European unions used for just conserving environment and forest. So my concern is this, as Rwandan people and even for East African community, so we also need to learn from these so that we can also conserve our environment and then for better life. So about to what Professor Jack mentioned it struck me. I did have the questions just to ask him if he's to this. We really enjoyed just the conversations we got from him. It was really interesting, and we really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to ask Jacques Godefroy for 30 seconds to help to answer the question from Jean-Claude. Jacques, can you hear me, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, no, I find the discussion very, very interesting, and so once we have discussed and understood a little bit the context, the global context, and how this is working, as I try to mention to you, there are two ways to tackle the problem. The first one is the big discourse. So now we understand these pandemic problems, and we understand that it's a very, very, very serious problem, and we understand that the WHO, the FAO are really main actors, and a lot of resources are being put into this problem. So that's the big discourse. And so the result of this thing is that we want to mitigate the effect of the pandemic, mainly is in the northern hemisphere. That's the unfortunate reality. When we speak about the pandemic, we want to protect the millions of people that are living in the cities in the north first. Other people come after. And the other people that will come after are people living in cities in the developing world. And what will be done for communities is a little bit absent of this general discourse. So this is why narratives, meaning the stories in communities, should not be marginalized as they are now. the voices of people in communities should be heard too. And so there is a big effort that should be done. We are also taking care of local communities. Because perhaps you remember also the effect of the Ebola pandemic a couple of years ago, mainly in West Africa. Actions that were taken worldwide to mitigate the effect of this pandemic resulted in the fact that means that were supposed to enhance the interest of the United States first.
Thank you so much.
So meaning that other people in the world came later. So this is the international people, and we have to work with communities in order to implement some measures that are efficient and doable at the local level. But these measures be generated from themselves.
Thank you so much, Jacques. Let me ask Professor Nicholas, from your experience, how do you see the perspective of the people?
Yes, from a legal perspective, there are very few international agreements placing the emphasis upon the role of local population. So the emphasis has been placed in most treaties. If one looks at the participation, the communication towards local communities that are the users of the components of the biodiversity in forest, peatlands, lakes, the participation step in the legal system too. But that raises questions how to identify what's a minority. I've been refusing ever since minorities, be it France, be it in Belgium, although the minorities it's obvious. And that's really give rise to serious debate. I know that I've been professing the use for the reindeer, that's the Sami minority. They felt very discriminated by usually by the forestry authorities or the environmental authorities because they've been placing restrictions upon the grazing of the reindeers in the forest or in the marshlands. So there you clearly have conflicts between proper resource management of peatland, marshlands, forests, and the wishes of the local communities to expand the cattle. You know, we see exactly the same situation, be it in Kenya, in Somalia, in South Sudan. Again, I have to stress the limits of the legal system. So the legal system is always catching up. So we have a climate change law, but it's a belated climate change. We should have had climate change rules 30 years ago. We are coming too late with it. With the new rules, we want to succeed to stop the ever increase of temperatures across the planet.
Thank you so much. Last, Diocles, what's your suggestion about the measures should be taken to preserve the forest based on your community experience?
Thank you. My name is Diocles Mtuyezu, as you said, and you asked me to suggest some measures in forest preservation. Of course, this is the first measure as we joined all of us here to provide different ideas on solving different problems that are about the forest. They said that the first presenter here said that we are here not to discuss climate change problem, but to provide solutions. So the first measure is organization of these conferences discussing about the problems that are facing our forest. The second, it is to take part, not ending here in discussion, but going and practice what we discussed. And Another thing, it is, of course, planting different trees, but after planting the trees, care the trees. What is our actions to care those trees, those other activities done to care our forest? We have to care that. And I have another suggestion, other than preservation of forest. I heard that suggestion before. This, you know that when you have a goal, you have to revise it every day. And I want to ask the one who organized this conference, how this is going to be repeated. When we come here for this time and we go and it end, it means that we don't revise, it can end here. But if this conference is helping us to discuss different problems, how this is going to be repeated, to discover different problems so that we can have ability to take action to those problems. Another thing, we got a chance to meet different experts here, or those who did these many years. How are you going to help us to join you in taking action? As Clemence said it yesterday, she talked about taking action, stopping this, saying this in words, but taking action. For those who want, how are you going to help us to join you in taking action? I can say many things, but if you can help us from that, it can be enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Allow me to go to the end of this round table. 30 seconds each.
Okay, this is an advice to every young leader, every young conservationist in the house. So we've been listening to EU regulations, we've been listening to carbon market and everything else. But I want you guys to think this, it's a way to exchange knowledge, you get it. But young people from Africa, you guys need to see these things in a Afrofuturism way, like being these regulations in an African context or framework. Thank you so much.
Okay, Q, for me, it's a suggestion I wanted to give. I don't know if among us there is someone who works here in the hotel, but even the organizers will help us. As we are sitting here talking about environmental protection, I don't know why we are using these bottles. While there are alternatives, there are some alternatives we can use instead of using these bottles. As we all know how harmful they are. Some of the alternatives, you can say we can use you all know drip. Some of us, we have them at home. We can use them even in the building like this when we are having a meeting. They can give us that big bottle, they bring us even the glasses we can use. I think the organizers can look at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity. So my suggestion is going to be addressed for the person who comes from district. I mean, it's just Jean-Claude. So my suggestion is this one. We all know just if we want to keep conservation for our wildlife and environment, so we also need to educate young generations. Please, could you think to what you can do for those local communities, how they can conserve their environment? Maybe if you set classes, or if you can set people who can just educate those people how to conserve environment, and then it can be better. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's close this session here, so then we go to the end. Thank you so much for your participation in the roundtable, and the dear audience, thank you for your kind attention. Allow me to call Professor Nicholas to give us closer remarks about the symposium. And after Nicholas, I would like to ask Shema Serge to come to give us remarks as the director of Wildlife Conservation Initiative, and I will come back later to give remarks about as the executive director of Rugezi Ornithology Center. Thank you.
Yes, usually when I'm attending on Sunday the Mass, the priest ends with the practical issues. So the practical issues are discussed when the burial will take place, when the next Mass will take place. Come at the very end, but I start with the practical issues. I will forward you the link to the publication I wrote with Jacques Godefroy in Cambridge University Press journal. That publication has been widely quoted in the scientific literature, combining the scientific issues with the legal issues. I will provide you also the link to my own website, Trade versus Environment. Although there are many publications in French and Spanish, my mother languages, there are also the majority of the publications are in English. And don't be afraid, this legal publication, but political scientists have always been commenting positively about my writing in carving out this problem. So these are the practical issues. So I will cut a long story short and just a few comments. But it has been a highlight in the literature time again, a bit in mammalogy, being in ornithology, that it's the flurry of risk, it's the accumulation of risk, it's the synergies between the different risks that are putting ecosystem and species to the brink of extinction or to the brink of disasters, in spite of all the ecosystemic service that forests do provide for. Second remark, in a listening analysis or an exclusive ecological analysis is insufficient to cause that must combine legal analysis, economic analysis, sociological and anthropological analysis when it comes to the rights of minorities, but also ethics and cultural issues that should not be undermined. So, yeah, it's great things, the CDMs, the RED+, the LULUCF, but it doesn't work without addressing the legal issues, such as the contract, the ownership. This business exclusively to economists. Restoration, the new EU regulation on nature restoration with the aim to restore by 2050 all the degraded ecosystem. And the same trend is taking place in fisheries. Across the world, fisheries have been over-harvested, and so international agreements on fisheries, and the agencies try to work on rebuilding the stocks that have been undermined by overfishing. And so at national level, this is a key issue, is to move from national parks and nature sanctuaries or Ramsar zones into a much more dynamic approach with reforestation and afforestation in order to provide the link between the different protected areas, in order to provide the connectivity, and also in order to mitigate climate change risks and to avoid soil erosion. I've been working mostly in West Africa, in Burkina Faso, and I've always been crossing landscape in that country where the soil are bare. And these soils were very productive 30 years ago, but overgrazing, overexploitation of the soil led to full desertification. And I hope that will not happen to your country. So it's important that when these are learning also the lessons, the failures that are taking place in other countries. Last remark is the One Health concept. And the One Health concept is, again, a transversal approach. A medical approach alone is not sufficient. Medical approach must be combined with environmental protection to ward off new risks. So time and again, we see that we have to develop, to endorse a new vision. And that vision is a difficult one, because I'm a lawyer, I'm not an economist. I'm a lawyer, I'm not an anthropologist. But it means that the different disciplines have to work together. And very last remark, I think it's the general interest. The general interest is not just economic growth, although it's a poor country, there are poor communities in Rwanda, but it includes also cultural visions, ethics, societal needs, the quality of the health of the people, and so the government has to define the general interest in combining all its facets, all its components. And so one has to discard an exclusive economic approach. And implementation, the pursuance of general interest, requires again good governance and the rule of law. So this has been my first conference in East Africa. I gave already this year 3 conferences in Western Africa. So hopefully I've been learning a lot in 2 days. Hopefully you will take, in particular the new generation, take advantage of all the materials that will be communicated to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nicholas. We are very happy to have you here for 2 days, and then we learn more and more about Union European environmental law and how they are taking initiative to protect our planet. And then I think you learn more about Rwanda, environmental law and the other conservation activities that we are doing. Thank you so much for Godfrey, for good presentation, and the other speakers. Allow me to applaud for them. So, second thing, I want to apologize, not managing the time. We're supposed to leave here like 5 p.m. in these 2 days, but the symposium was good and was interesting. We really want to learn more, but we apologize for that. If you really pardon us, you can applaud for that. Ntabwo tuvuga amagambo menshi rero, ndagira ngo mvuge